Okay, I'm assuming and hoping you all hear me, and you all, when you want, can let me see you and let me hear you. If anyone has any technical issues, you can chat it to us. You could tell it to Rachel, and hopefully this is all going to go very smoothly. Usually it does, but sometimes someone's computer glitches a little. So I'm really glad every one of you committed to doing this, because honestly, I assume everyone here is a teacher, which means you're probably working very, very hard. For some of you, you've been teaching for years, and the idea of saying, you know what? I'm willing to try this. I'm willing to stretch myself. I'm willing to look at my preparation and look at it with the new eyes is really special. And for others, it's like, I'd like to be given an approach. I'd like to know that there are really steps. There really is a method, and I really could give my students even more than I'm giving them. So thank you for trusting me to take you on this journey. It's coming from about 30 years of teaching Chumash. I love to teach Chumash. I love to reach the minds and hearts of my students, and I hope you'll be able to also, even more through this. All right, so this course I called Steps in the Art of Teaching Rashi, and that's exactly what I'm giving you, a lot of steps. Feel free at any time when you don't understand something to tell us, because you probably aren't the only one that's like, not really sure what we're doing here. So let's go to the first step. Okay. The learner will read the chapter for storyline information. That's the first thing we have going on here. If some of you are not Chumash teachers, this equally applies. Any subject where you have a text, the first thing we need to do is scan that text and make sure our students have the broad picture before we go into the details. When do you do this? When do you start with step one? Beginning. What's the beginning? This is the beginning of every new section. In Chumash, the broadest section concept is a chapter, is a parak. So at the beginning of every section, you have your students look through the whole section, look through the whole parak, understand the broad story, and then we start going inside. At what grade do you start this? 7th grade. With each step that I do, I'm going to tell you the grade that in the typical scenario, this is when we target this skill. If your class is advanced, go for it. If they're not, modify it and bring it down to them. But from a 7th grade class, for sure, we do this. But if you're a 4th grade teacher, or a 5th grade teacher, or a 6th grade teacher, the teacher does this. Which means, now, let me understanding, because we're going to do this every single step. In my conception, we start teaching Rashi in 3rd grade. So 3rd grade, we're just trying to get them to understand what Rashi is. From 4th grade, you as the teacher, overview the chapter. And in 5th grade, and in 6th grade. And in 7th grade, your students do. So let me give you a very simple concept of what we mean here. Something like this. I have here the division of the psukim on one side, the division of what's happening in each section on the other. Who created this? From my perspective, your students, but it depends what grade they are. Let's say they're not of a grade to be able to do this themselves. So if they're 8th graders, you can give them the psukim and tell them to title the sections. Let's say they're 7th graders and they can't do that. Guess what? Put the psukim on one side and put the titles on the other and mix it up and have them match it. You can do that with a 4th grade class. If you take the division of the parak on one side and the titles on the other and say match, you can have 4th graders match. And maybe you're going to need to do for 5th graders. And maybe for 6th. And maybe for 7th. But by 8th, don't do it. Unless there's a really strong need because of some deficiencies they had in previous years. By 8th grade, you give them the psukim and tell them to title it. By 9th grade, tell your class, I would like you to divide this chapter into 7 sections. And for each section, title it. If you're a 10th grade teacher, tell your class, divide the chapter and title it and see what they do. Okay, before we continue, does anyone have any questions on this step? Great, so let's continue. All right, divide chapter 12, which is the parak we are doing, into 3 sections. Now, just a little word of introduction because I didn't take much time introducing it. We have now 10 sessions. 10 sessions might sound like a lot. Honestly, we're pressured. I have a lot I want to get through. I'm not going to finish in 10 sessions. I know I'm not. So I didn't give you much of an introduction. Every step that we are going to learn, I'm plugging into Parak Yubez of Bamidbar. Why did I choose Parak Yubez of Bamidbar? It has 16 psukim. And I want to blow your minds. I want you to see that in those 16 psukim, almost every step I'm talking about is found. Because when you're teaching, I don't want you to say, oh, this never comes up, this is too rare, I'm not going to focus on that. I found it in 16 psukim, find it in your psukim also. So we're looking throughout this entire workshop, we're going to be studying Parak Yubez of Bamidbar. If any of you teach Parak Yubez of Bamidbar, you are Hashem smiling on you right now, because you will understand it so well. And for the rest of us, we'll wish we were going to teach it. So I'd like you all to look at Parak Yubez of Bamidbar and divide it into 3 sections. You can send up to me your answers via chat. Either look in your own Chumash or I have it on the PowerPoint, whatever's simpler for you. Okay, I got one answer. So I see my instructions were not clear, which is fine. As a teacher, I have to make sure I'm being very clear. What I'd like you to do is similar to what I did, but I'm telling you here, I want you to divide the parak into 3 sections, which means, just as I gave you in the previous slide, I divided it here in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I took Parak Yubez, and the assignment I gave my students was divide it into 8 sections and entitle them. I'm asking you, instead of dividing this into 8 sections, to divide it into 3. Which is the real answer? They're both the real answer. It depends what you want to achieve. They're both fine. But for now, because I want to give you an opportunity to do this, I have to do something different than what I did. So I'm asking you to divide it into 3 sections. When I taught this, I had my students divide it into 8. So I need to see, however you want to show it to me, 1 through whatever, comma, blank through whatever, blank through whatever. I'd like to see those 3 sections. Okay, I'm still not seeing psukim coming up. I need to see your division psukim. Send up to me your division. If you think the first section is 1 through 5, and the second is 6 through 10, and the third is 11 through 16, write it to me. Don't listen to what I just told you. I picked up numbers out of the air. By the way, future reference for all chaps, don't send it private, only because I'm trusting that all of us want to learn. So we're going to try to do this ourselves. And once you do it yourself, it's good for you to look and see what other people did. It might get you to think about your own thoughts. But if you prefer to have it private, of course, that's fine. Okay, I'm going to deal with the ones I have because I know sometimes for time benefit, it's always a question, wait or don't wait. So let's look at the answers. Now, most of them were sent in private, so I have to look at the answers. Next time, people will just make theirs public and we can all tear apart everyone's answers. As I'm going to do this throughout the workshop, I'm modeling myself as a teacher and how I would deal with my students. You can completely disagree with what I'm doing and feel free to tell me. Okay, so I want to teach my students a skill. Now, something very important here is, this is not Torah L'Moshe Sinai. This has to be logical. It has to conceptually work. I want my student to take ownership of Chumash. So if I see, for example, a student that did something very different than I did, but they could defend themselves, I'll take it. I don't care. So I see here, I have for my class, less than half sent it up to me. If this was my class, I'd force you to do a little more. So once we got the psukim, I have Rabbi Shapiro saying 1 through 2, the Lashon Hara, 3 through 8, Hashem's, it got cut off, and then 9 and continuing the punishment. I have someone else that told me 1 through 3. Hani said 1 through 3, 4 through 10, 11 through 16. Rabbi Shapiro went from 9 through 16. Esty told me 1 to 3, 4 to 10, 11 to 16. And Chaya, we're going to give her a round of applause because she not only, I always clap in my class, and I always make my students clap for each other. Chaya not only divided it, she entitled it. I first got titles, then I got psukim, now I got both. 1 through 3, sin, 4 through 9, rebuke, and 10 through the end, punishment. Okay, so what do I do as a teacher? I can do a lot of different things here. And it depends, honestly, on how much time I have, how much I feel my students need this skill, how much I want to do something that's easy and make everyone feel very part of the class. Because this is easy. And therefore, a student who maybe is not so good at some other things can do this and can take part in it and can feel like, oh, Mrs. Turen thinks I think really well. So I might spend a lot of time to make a student feel that way because I feel as a teacher, I want you to take ownership of Chumash. And if I have to build you up a lot for you to walk away thinking you're an awesome Chumash learner, I succeeded. I have you for the rest of the year. It's worth it. So some of the divisions were just like mine. Honestly, I made 2 divisions because they're both logical. My divisions were 1 through 3, 4 through 9 or 4 through 10. Both are logically defensible. And then 10 through 16 or 11 through 16, which is what most of you did. But if I would turn to my student, Rabbi Shapiro, who's not a rabbi, he's a student in my class at this moment, so he's a younger boy, and I would say, Rabbi Shapiro, you did 1 through 2, and then you put 3 with 8. Tell me why you did that. Now, I'm not going to Rabbi Shapiro answer now, though he could, but I just want to quickly show you the concept. So Rabbi Shapiro could say, well, I feel this pasuk about Moshe must be part of Hashem's response, because it's obviously not their Lashon Hara. How could someone say 1 through 3 and call it the sin? Talking about Moshe as humble is part of the sin? I don't buy that. I think it's part of Hashem's perspective on the issue. I would say, I like that, Rabbi Shapiro. That's very good thinking. I accept it. Do 1 through 2 and then keep going with 3. I like it. It's logical. It works. It wasn't what I thought, and it's great thinking. Go for it. Now we're continuing picking on Rabbi Shapiro because he did a little differently than my model, and he did 3 through 8, which was perhaps, again, I can't read what you wrote here, Hashem's response, how Hashem responded to this or something like that. And then from 9, he's cut it to Veichar Af Hashem Bam Vayelach. Now in my head, 9 was surely part of the second section and could not possibly be the third section. But you know what? Maybe it could be. Maybe my student here is going to explain to me that no, Veichar Af Hashem Bam Vayelach is part of the consequence. It's part of the what Chaya called the punishment. I believe it goes in the end. It's part of not the Musar, but the aftermath. He didn't entitle it, so I'm making titles for him. And I would say, Rabbi Shapiro, that's good thinking. I like that. It's not on my paper, but it's good. Go for it. I accept that. Now, can you accept anything your students say? Of course not. If your student said 1 through 5, no. And you might ask them to defend themselves. You might say to the class, do you accept what they're saying? Usually they'll say, blah, 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 blah. You might turn to another student and say, Chaya, can you explain to Dino why Psukim 1 through 5 doesn't work? Wherever you could get the students to be teachers, it's always better than a teacher being a teacher. Don't accept something that has no logical base. But if the student did something different from you, but it's plausible or fairly plausible, or for a weak student, perhaps plausible, take it. Why? Because in the end of the day, I want my student to feel, I can master this. And that's more important than anything else. Let's do another one. Okay, now I divided it into 4 sections. Instead of asking you to make the division, I gave you 4 divisions. I would like you to cross-check my 4 divisions to these psukim, and then send up as a chat your answer. Is the best division A, B, C, or D? as a teacher, would it be beneficial to give a time frame to your students? You could. I mean, my time frame is I'm looking to see when I get enough of a response to keep going. I don't usually, because I feel that pressures them. I don't want them to feel pressure, but it might be beneficial. I think it really would depend on the class and how much you feel they work within that and how much you feel that might shut them down. But I'm going to move on because I did get a lot of answers while I was looking at that. So I have here C, A, B, C, A. The only one that wasn't picked was D. Okay. By the way, 3 out of 4 of these I would call correct. But if I want to stretch it based on how I see some of you are thinking, we could say they're all defensible. Nothing I think was completely off. All of them could have logical defense. Why did I do that? I did that something like this that I'm showing you is because I want to show my students, use your minds, think, take ownership. There's more than one way of looking at something. As long as you can validate it, as long as it's intrinsically logical, beautiful. I accept it. And that's true because, as I've said already many times in the short time we've been together, you want your students to feel they're active participants in the learning process. It's not that I'm the teacher. I know almost everything, and when I don't know, I'm going to make sure you don't realize, and you're the student. We're partners. I've learned this more than you, but we're learning together. You might have great ideas. I might have great ideas. You might refute my ideas. I might refute your ideas. Take ownership in your learning. But the idea of it, which is that what I want for you to be able to master the skill, we definitely got. All right. Why did we do that? None of you asked me. By the way, you can feel free to unmute yourself. It's a little eerie for me. I'm not used to having absolute silence when I teach. I should pretend I am in a class, but I'm totally not. We did this because before you can look at a pasuk, look at a Rashi, you need the broad scope of the whole issue. Like, we want to see the forest, and then we're going for a tree. So you first want to introduce the parak by let's overview it. This tool, dividing it, entitling it, is giving them the ability to demonstrate that they were able to skim that chapter and they understand the storyline. And that was the purpose. Now that we understand the storyline, let's go to step 2. Step 2, the learner will analyze and question the text. Why am I doing this? By now you know. I want them to take ownership. I also want them to be interested. It's much more interesting if you have a question and then, hey, Rashi had the same one, or a Chaim, I wasn't planning on going into it, but since you asked, I'll tell you his answer. Or that's a Malbim. You had the same question Malbim raised. Huge for their learner self-esteem. So in my model class, this is based on something I didn't do with you before. This is my student's question that she came up with. How could they say Lashon Hara? What was the Lashon Hara? Why now are they saying Lashon Hara? How do you get them to give you this information? In many different ways. When do you do this? You do this at the beginning of every section once we divide it into the parak. Remember, we had a parak. How many sections did we divide our parak into? Well, as a teacher, maybe you divide it into 8, like my first model. Maybe you divide it into 3, like my second. Maybe you divide it into 4, like my third. In the beginning of the section, have your students do this. And it doesn't make a difference if it's 8 or 4 or 3. From what grade? From 6th grade. From 6th grade, have your students do this. Any 6th grader can do this. They don't have to be very intellectually gifted, and they don't have to be very good technically. And you can get them involved. It's a great draw. Can I use this in a not Chumash class? Absolutely. Use this in any class you teach where they can look at a text and question it. It works for anything. Now, when I'm doing this idea, how do I have them do it? Lots of different ways. You could tell them to write down their questions and tell you the best one. You can tell them to write down their questions, think, pair, share. Share it with the girl next to them, and the two of them together produce the best one. You can write the questions on the board. You can tell them to write the questions on a separate piece of paper, and at the end of the paragraph, we'll cross-check if we answer them. You could do it loads of different ways. Let's go back to what Chaya said. Time frame. Very key idea. If you don't have a lot of time, do this really fast. If you don't have a lot of interest in your subject, take a long time. It will heighten the interest. If you have a kid who's normally not interested and she gets into this, for her sake, pull her in through this. It's worth it. Great. Okay. That was simple. That was fast. And now we move on. Prerequisites to high school Rashi skills. This is what I'm calling step 3. Now, my true confession. I have never taught elementary school in my life. So do not ask me the best method in doing any of these things, because I don't know. And I'm not going to pretend I know something I don't know. But as a high school Chumash teacher, I know what my students need to look like when they walk into 9th grade. So for any of you that teach elementary, you need to make sure your students can do every one of these things. My job is to take them and then move them from this point. Your job is to get them to this point. What do you do if you have a student that isn't at this point? What I would do, it might be debatable, and some of you would disagree with me, is I would say I'd let them have an English linear Chumash in my class. Because if I don't, they're going to sit and space out for 45 minutes. If I do, they might actually learn some things. At the same time, if possible, I'd like to get them tutored in all of these issues as well. I'm not going to take more time on this because this isn't my forte, but I wanted to bring it in because if you're an elementary teacher, you have to do this. And now we move on to step 4. The learner will incorporate Rashi in the text. What do I mean by that? This happens every single Rashi. This happens if you're an elementary teacher. This happens if you're a seminary teacher. If you're not teaching Chumash, but you have this style of learning, it happens there as well. What do you need to do? You need to make sure that when you finish the Rashi, your students can take this Rashi and integrate it into the text. If they can't, you just wasted a lot of time. Or you taught them a beautiful subject called Rashi. You thought you were teaching them Chumash, but instead you're teaching them Rashi. Rashi is not an independent subject. Rashi is helping us understand Chumash. So when we forget to put the Rashi back into the Chumash, we taught a subject called Rashi, not a subject called Chumash. What are the ages that you're going to integrate this? 3rd, 4th grade teachers, because I said you do this every single Rashi. So if you're a 3rd grade teacher, you do this also. 3rd, 4th grade teachers, have them do it. Tell them, incorporate the Rashi into the text. Will they do a perfect job? No, they won't. Listen to them and modify it. It's fine. 5th, 6th grade teachers, tell them to do this. In your notes, I'd like you to write down how you would incorporate Rashi into the text or on the handout or on your paper, however you're teaching them. And then pick on a few girls. Pick on like 3 girls in the class and say, Sarah, how did you do this? I'm going to give an example of what I mean as soon as I finish dividing into grades. Actually, you're going to give me the example. Sarah, how did you do it? Okay, class, let's hear Sarah. Rivka? Okay. Devora? Class, we just heard from Sarah, Rivka, and Devora. Tell me, class, let's vote. Whose was the best? Because this way I get the whole class involved, I get their minds thinking about it, and I get them understanding through the process of deciding which one was the best, what we're really trying to do here. Now, obviously, going back to what Chaya said about time, that's going to take time. It's worth it. Because if they can't properly put the Rashi back in the Chumash, you didn't teach Chumash. By the time you're in 7th grade, you don't need that. You just worked on it so long for the past 2 years. So at this point, we finish the Rashi, and we say, Rivka, can you plug Rashi into the pasuk? She plugs it in. Beautiful. She can't really do it. Sarah, can you help Rivka? What did she not do properly? What does she need to remember? What should she take out? Move quickly, but you must do it every Rashi. So what do I mean by integrate Rashi into the pasuk? So let's try. Okay, this is my assignment. This is the Rashi. You obviously did not just spend 20 minutes learning this Rashi with me, but you're teachers. So read the Rashi to yourself and pretend this is the end of my lesson on this Rashi. We chewed through the entire Rashi. They figured out Rashi's question. They figured out Rashi's answer. They figured out if those quotes are proofs or answers. They figured out if they're proofs, why they're proofs. Maybe we spent 40 minutes on this Rashi. We are done. Now we're up to the final step. This is always the final step. Plug this Rashi into the text. So I am giving you 3 options of what plugging this Rashi into the text looks like. I'd like you to send up to me which is the most accurate way of plugging the Rashi into the text. Obviously, take the time to read the Rashi first. Okay, I have 3 answers. I waited a bit more, but I'm going to move on. Aviva, Chaya, and Rabbi Shapiro all said A. I disagree with them. Notice here I'm not saying, well, it was a good idea. Chaya decided B is also right. My answer is C. Now that you know my answer, I'd like someone to unmute themselves and tell me, don't worry, you'll all get very comfortable with yourself. By the 3rd session, we'll all be talking freely. It just takes a little bit of time. Why is C more correct than A or B? Why would you want your student to say C and not A and not B?
I'm unmuting myself. I think that C is Chaya Zirkind. Basically, I think that the proper word for C to be correct, it would not be with Dibor, because that would mean it would be better to say via Dibor. With Dibor connotes that they're speaking with a medium, but over here, what the point of the Rashi is that they're speaking via Dibor, like they're speaking harshly using Dibor.
I like that comment. I like that critique on my work, and I accept that. So we're going to put the word via here. I'll type it in later. But I still want an answer to my question. If my student gave me A, I would not accept it. If they gave me B, I would not accept it. I need to see the word, obviously, what C has that A does not have. I need to see. I'd like someone to unmute themselves and say, why is C better? Or what's the problem with A and what's the problem with B? I'll accept that also.
Well, C defines what Dibor means, which is what the Rashi is connotating. Ein Dibor b'chol makom ela lashon kasha. So what C does is that it spoke via Dibor, harshly, so it's like inserting the translation. So that's why I guess C would be more correct.
Exactly.
Now that we switched.
So A, my problem with A is what word is it missing? Let's get another voice. What word is A missing?
Dibor.
Dibor. Thank you, Chani. If your student doesn't incorporate the word Dibor, she didn't get the point of the Rashi. What's my problem?
Say something for a second.
Yes,
the point is to plug it in, show how Rashi's explanation flows in the pasuk. Then you actually have to take out the word Dibor. Rashi is really saying it's kasha. Not with Dibor. Dibur itself is kosher.
I'm hearing you a little bit in and out. I hope that's not what Dina meant when she said that she wasn't hearing me properly, because it was very hard for me to hear you. I hope not. If it is, I don't know why. Maybe it's your internet connection. I couldn't exactly hear what you said. Can you say it again? And I'm going to try to follow.
Tell me if you can hear me clearly now.
Better, much better.
Okay. If the idea is to plug this into the text, you would define what Rashi is saying within the text without quoting Rashi. So then actually having the word dibur is not helpful. You have to be able to say that daber already means kosher. Like Rashi says, vayigash, yigash means kosher. That's what vayigash means.
Okay, I think I'm hearing you now, but I don't know if I'm hearing perfectly. Let me play back what I think you're saying. What you're saying is, this is how I would do it. We finish the Rashi, and by the way, I do this cumulatively. I mean, if there's 4 Rashis on a pasuk, each time we incorporate Rashi in the pasuk, we start back from the beginning of the pasuk and we go to the end. So my goal is, by the time I finished, I drilled it into them, and they now understand how they're supposed to look at the whole pasuk. So I think what Rabbi Shapiro is saying is, if my student said that to Daber and Miriam and Aaron spoke with Dibor harshly, you're saying using the word Dibor is inappropriate because it's not Rashi's Perush, it's the Chumash?
Basically, you're repeating yourself. If Rashi is telling you that daber already means harshly, the idea that you want the children, the student, to know how Rashi learns the pasuk. Rashi doesn't say that daber means harshly. Rashi doesn't have to say spoke with Dibur harshly. It would say spoke harshly. Already understand that daber means harshly.
Okay, now I hear you enough to understand what you're saying. Chaya said she can't hear me. Do people hear me? Like, not if you hear me. Of course, I can't see anyone's faces. Okay, Rabbi Shapiro hears me. He's the only face I see. I'm sorry if you can't hear me. I don't know why I couldn't hear Rabbi Shapiro too well. I'll try to articulate more clearly. I hear what you're saying. There's a point to it, but I feel that you in this step, oh, thank you. I got 2 people that heard me clearly. I was trying to think, oh no, how are they learning? In this step, if you don't have your student reuse the word Dibor, then they're missing the point. They just walked away with this globalized concept that Dibor, that's a daber, and they spoke harshly. I want my student to understand that Rashi's Nakuda is because the Shirish is Dibor, it's harsh. I
understand what you're saying, but for me, it sounds like you have to have them repeat the word Dibor, that you should know that they know it. That doesn't necessarily mean that they don't know it if they just say it and spoke harshly. You just don't know if they connect the word Dibor with harshly.
I hear what you're saying. But maybe I'm not clearly explaining my goal in this. I have 2 goals. One is, and these are very important goals, and I'm glad we're spending time on this. Because if you walk away, and this is one thing you learned from 10 hours, it was still worth it for your students. I have 2 goals in this. One is, I want my students to be able to synopsize the Rashi. 2 is, I want my students to integrate the Rashi into the pasuk. Goal 2 is more important and most often not done. So if we don't repeat the word Dibor, my student might know that she learned in this Rashi that Miriam and Aaron were harsh, but she might have missed the Nakuda of the Rashi, which is the reason why we know it's harsh is because of the word Dibor. I saw actually recently, I think I was trying to Sicha, that the reason why Dibor is harsh because it's like a manhig. It wasn't a Sicha. I was like, hey, I got to remember that for Chumash class. That a dover is like a manhig, is like a leader, so there's that harshness there. So I have no problem accepting what you're saying. I have no problem if you don't accept everything I'm saying and you would prefer your students not to use the word dibur because you think it's being redundant and not doing it properly. I accept that. I, though, wouldn't do it. I would feel as a teacher, if they don't emphasize dibur, I'm too scared, especially with girls. Girls like worship their notebooks. So instead of focusing on the text and the Rashi, they're going to focus on their notebooks. So I want to make sure in their notebooks, synopsized as the Rashi kernel, the crux of the Rashi, is dibur is harsh. But I can accept what you're saying, and I can sort of see it both ways. Okay, so Viva asked me again, can you define what you mean by incorporating Rashi in the pasuk? So I think maybe in answering Rabbi Shapiro I did, but I'm willing to say it again. We finished learning the entire Rashi. My goal now is that the student looks at the pasuk through the eyes of Rashi, because that's ultimately Rashi's goal. Rashi, as he always tells us, and we always know, and we probably say to our students, Eini basi el lefarish pshuto shel mikra. Basmei pshuto shel mikra. It means this is how you're supposed to look at the pasuk. So if we don't look at the pasuk in the eyes of Rashi, we didn't do Rashi's mandate. That's what I meant by saying we learned a new subject we created called Rashi. And my students have lots of notes on Rashi. And they'll know Rashi's answer, they'll know Rashi's question, they might know if it's approved, they might know why it's approved, but they never put it back in the Chumash, they never did Rashi's mission statement. I'm not explaining the Chumash, I learned a subject called Rashi. So what I'm trying to do in the end is, this is what Rashi wants, that you look at the pasuk through his prism, through his paradigm. Now when you do that, now let me go to B. Why didn't I like B, which is in essence saying the same thing? Because it has too many words. Because I don't want my student to regurgitate the Rashi. I don't want my student to say, but to daber, and dibur connotes hard speech, and Miriam and Aaron spoke in a manner of dibur. I did a perfect job. I told you the whole point of the Rashi. You did, but that's not called incorporating into the pasuk. That's called saying the dibur hamaskil and giving me over the Rashi. So I don't want that many words. I want a flow that truly by the end of me reading this pasuk, I flow, but to daber Miriam and Aaron, alados, ha'isha kushas ha'lakach, ha'isha kushas lakach, and exactly. Summarize it really short and stick it into a pasuk in a way that flows. Thank you, Aviva. Yes. Any other questions on this? It's a very crucial step. It's your final step, and I started with it first because you need to know your destination before you start traveling. Any other questions on this? Yes, perfect. A translate according to Rashi means exactly the same thing. I sometimes say that also.
So I'm just wondering, because translating according to Rashi, I would want A. Because if I'm translating, I don't want them to do A and B and C. So A would be the pasuk, B would be the Rashi, and when I say translate according to Rashi, I want them to get to C. So incorporate the Rashi in the pasuk, I maybe would use C, but when I say translate according to Rashi, B, I would want them to get to a new, like if you're translating, then A really works best.
Okay, so then I don't want them to translate if that's what you're saying.
Right, so I think it could be two different things because I want them to move away from the word dibur because the word dibur is there, and translating using Rashi.
Right, you're absolutely right. And that's why I wouldn't tell them then translate, because I want them to incorporate the Rashi.
Right, so it's two different things.
But I think that's a good scaffolding technique. What Hani just said, having her students translate according to Rashi and then scaffold it. Now that we translate according to Rashi, let's go to the next level. Let's incorporate Rashi into this pasuk, because ultimately that's Rashi's goal. Rashi wants us to look at the pasuk through his eyes. That's what he's teaching us. But I'm glad that you already do it. That's very reassuring, because very often teachers never thought to do that. All right. Now that we know our destination, let's start arriving there. Step 5. In other words, step 5 is the beginning step of your teaching the Rashi. I'm going to review a little bit because I sort of felt in the beginning, though I wasn't hearing any voices, but I felt there was a little bit of confusion. So I want to review just to summarize what we've done so far. You are the teacher. You are beginning to teach Perek Yebez of Bamidbar. The first thing you do in whatever fashion you want, is have your students skim through the parak and create some type of division that you know they understood the parak. You take the first section, if it's Aleph through Beis or if Aleph through Gimel, and you say, let's look at these psukim and what questions you have on it, with whatever technique you want to elicit their thinking. Definitely, step 1 and 2, you have a lot of flexibility. It could take a lot of your class time. It could take very little of your class time. A well-skilled class, you're going to move very quickly through step 1 and 2. A poorly skilled class that you want to pull them into Chumash and make them enjoy Chumash, you're going to take more time, especially step 2. That's an enjoyable step. We came then to, step 1 and step 2. I think I might have forgotten something. Yes, step 3 was the background that you were supposed to have done in elementary school. We come then now to step 4. What we just did in step 4 is the final step in your teaching this Rashi. I put it first because I want you to know where you're going. That's your destination. Now that you marked it on the map, let's get in the car and go. So now we're moving. Now we're driving. Now I'm teaching this Rashi. And the first step in teaching the Rashi is the learner will formulate Rashi's question. When do I do this? Every single Rashi. From which grade? From 4th grade. Which basically means from when you first begin teaching Rashi. Now, in 4th grade, the teacher is going to tell the student Rashi's question. But over the year, yes, even over the 4th grade year, you are going to more and more become the guide that the student should formulate the question instead of becoming the mouthpiece that goes like from your brain cells onto their note paper of this is the information. So every year, less and less you'll be giving them the information, and more they will be the producers, they will be the initiators of this information. What skills are there? I know I'm supposed to have them formulate Rashi's question, but I don't really know what I'm supposed to do, and they for sure don't. This is the first step in terms of this broad goal of formulating Rashi's question. The first step is analyze the words of the Dibur HaMaschil. Very important. Every one of your students must know the significance of the Dibur HaMaschil. These are the words Rashi needs to explain or directly relate to his explanation. So how do we do this practically? This is how you do it. You don't show them the Rashi. This is very important. Do not let them read the Rashi. Once they read the Rashi, you lost the golden opportunity of them being a Ben Chamesh L'Mikra. To be a Ben Chamesh L'Mikra, you can't know what Rashi said. You only have the pasuk and your brain to start wondering things. So how do you do this with your class? It depends on what your class is like. If they're kids that would never look in the Rashi if you told them not to, just say this is the next Dibur HaMaschil, and what bothers you about these words? If your class is not like that, and they will definitely look in the Rashi to impress you by thinking of the question, which means they read the Rashi, don't let them look inside. Make a PowerPoint. Put it on a blackboard. Give it to them in a handout. They cannot look at the Rashi to properly do this step. So please send up to me in the chat, what is Rashi's question? I'm sorry, Aviva, I just noticed your question. Did I answer it enough? Great. And I do all of those things. And again, if your students, you know they're the type to do inside, have them close their Chumash. It's fine. You're not the type to prepare a handout. You're not the type to prepare a PowerPoint. Write it on the board. It didn't take any preparation time. Their Chumash is closed. All they see is the Dibur HaMaschil. So please send up to me in your chat, what's bothering you about this? What's your question on these words? I think I have teaching Chumash teachers. Great. Excellent questions. Excellent questions. They're all really, really good questions. all of these issues. You didn't need to look at Rashi. You're looking at the Dibur HaMaschil and you see problems. You wonder why is Miriam first. You wonder why this is feminine and Yochid. Perfect. Your students will too. I mean, this is obvious. Obviously, I'm starting with something obvious, but your students will too. And then the Rashi is exciting because they're not reading a Rashi. They're truly finding out the answers to their questions. I know for myself, and as a teacher, I always catch myself from saying Rashi's question. It's not Rashi's question. It's my question that Rashi's answering. Or if I'm not so smart to have questions, at least let's call it the Ben Chamesh L'Mikra's question that Rashi's answering. It's not Rashi's question. Rashi's coming to give us the answers to our questions. When you do it this way, they get the question. They have it. Now let's say your students couldn't think about this. Do I do this every Rashi? Yes. This is the first step of every Rashi, is just looking at the Dibur HaMaschil. Do not look at the Rashi. Even if you know that this Rashi, they will never get just from the Dibur HaMaschil, I don't care. I'll do the step, just do it more quickly. Because you have to train your students, this is the proper way to learn. So if you deviate, they're for sure going to deviate. Let's say my students didn't come up with it. Okay, here, I mean, obviously, after we look at the Rashi, all of these questions, by the way, are good, and all these questions Rashi answers. He doesn't answer all of them in the beginning of this Rashi. The beginning of this Rashi, as Chaya said, why is Miriam first? And as Hani added, why is Miriam first? But Rashi does explain also about the singular, two people talking, about it being feminine. Brilliant. Great questions. What if my students didn't get it from the Dibur HaMaschil? They're not as good as some of my students now. They said, I don't know, looks fine to me. The next step you do is you show it to them in the context of the pasuk. Meaning, if they're looking at the Dibur HaMaschil and they have no questions, let's look at the whole pasuk. Sometimes truly, only from the pasuk can you understand Rashi's problem. Let's say they can't get it from the pasuk. Now, step 3, last ditch resort, have them look at the Rashi. I know some people think the last ditch resort is have them look at Sifsei. No, that's not my resort. I don't do that. Look at the Dibur HaMaschil, then look at the whole pasuk, then look at the Rashi. Those are the steps I train my students, how they create the questions. Not how they read, how Sifsei synopsize Mizrahi's perspective on the Rashi. Did that answer, Hani, why I don't like looking at Sifsei? Not really. Okay, so I'll give it over one more time. I noticed your question after I sort of answered in my own rambling. I feel when you show your students a mefarish of Rashi, you shut down their brain cells. They're not figuring out Rashi's question anymore. They're reading how someone else understands Rashi's question. My goal is that my student comes up with Rashi's question. Again, they're thinking. I don't want them to read, I want them to think. And they're taking ownership. And if they create a question, their interest level in the answer is exponential. Now, let's say they're not very good at coming up with the question. They're not really very logical, precise thinkers. So that's where you come in as a teacher and you guide them. I would rather guide my students 90% of the way to get that question than to have them read the question in Sifsei. Because I didn't gain anything by reading them in Sifsei. Well, what did I gain by them looking at Sifsei? That they can read the Hebrew or the Aramaic? I mean, that's not my goal. I want them to learn how to create a question. I don't want them to learn how to read Sifsei. So that's why I do not feel you have your students look at Sifsei or look in the linear Chumash on the bottom where they might have written a question for them to create Rashi's question. You have them authentically create Rashi's question. When they look at the Dibur HaMaschil or they look at the pasuk and they create a question, that's an authentic Ben Chamesh L'Mikra learning experience. And if we can't do that, we're going to look in the Rashi and work deductively. That's good too. But the other ways, it's not giving them the skills of learning how to think through Rashi. Let's do another one. Okay. Now notice here, I'm giving you the pasuk. I highlighted the Dibur HaMaschil, and I'm giving you the Dibur HaMaschil. You could start off like that too, which I'm sort of focusing on the Dibur HaMaschil, but I'm incorporating my step 2 and putting it in the context of the pasuk. If you want to do it so pretty, you would need a PowerPoint, but you could just write it on the board and then highlight or underline the Dibur HaMaschil. Or if you have a whiteboard, write it in a different color pen marker. Okay, I need more people responding. I can't move on if I don't have one person that responded. Look at the Dibur HaMaschil. Look at the pasuk. I got a second response. And the response was correct, but it was privated so no one else can see it but me. Don't private your responses unless you really don't want anyone else to see them. Great. I got another private answer that was correct. Don't private your answers. Let everyone see them. All right, well, I got a few answers, and I want to move on. I know we're over time, but I want to make sure I gave you something to work on for the next week. So, looking at the answers I have one person that said she focused on the hey, harak ach. So, now I'm the teacher. I'm playing this out because I want you to see how you might do it. I would say to my class, I'm not going to say to the student, someone said, I would say the name. Miriam said, harak ach, and what's bothering her is the hey. Class, who can tell Miriam, or in this case, Chaya, why that probably is not what's really the Ben Chamish Lemikras question here? Someone say it safely with your voice so we can move more quickly. Why would that not seem an authentic question here on the Dibur HaMaschil?
I'm assuming by Bamidbar, Rashi's already spoken about Hey Sheila.
That could be, and then I like that. We could do this. Thank you. So Aviva, who did not unmute herself, said because quotes both words, it would just be harak. Great work, Aviva. Chaya, does that make sense to you now? Meaning, I don't want to say it, let my students say it. If this is the Dibur HaMaschil, now here is also, by the way, going back to my peeve on Sifsei, if you will. Sifsei obviously is just, summarizing. But generally, his questions in no way match, or he sees no reason to religiously stick to the Dibur HaMaschil. Everything I'm teaching is through the paradigm of the Rebbe's ways of instructing us how to look at Rashi. I look at it that the Rebbe taught us maybe, I don't know, however many hundreds of Rashis, and from the, let's say, 300 Rashis the Rebbe taught us, he wants us to look at thousands of Rashi through those eyes. So one thing we definitely learned is, if the question is not integral to the Dibur HaMaschil, it's not this we're talking about here. So I would want my students to say that, because by now I sure hope they know that. But good thinking, Chaya, because I like the fact that you noticed the hey, and that could be something going on here. We don't know. We don't know what Rashi's answer is going to be. Let me look at a few of the other answers I got. The next answer I got was, it sounds repetitive. Perfect thinking. Now, someone else said to me, the next one, to miyutim. Why? The same thing, just phrased more sophisticated. I like that. Good. I like that you remember that word miyutim. I'm saying this to my students. Dina said double lashon. Great. Double lashon, repetitive, to miyutim. You're saying the exact same thing. You're all thinking along the right line, the lines of Rashi, or you're all thinking along the same lines. Let's see if that's Rashi's lines. Okay, I think that basically covered the answers we got, which is good. This is good. This means your class, this is my class, generally was able to focus that if I have two words that mean the same thing, rak and ach, why would the pasuk say two for the price of one? We're not doing that. This is Chumash. We want to minimize, not maximize, the wordage here. Now, someone said, I think it was Aviva, someone said, how is she supposed to see anything just from the, I don't see from just the Dibur HaMaschil. So let's say your student said that to you, because that's a very plausible thing that your student will say to you. I don't know, I just see the Dibur HaMaschil. Here is where you, as a teacher, can choose to guide the students. Now, you might not, because the class working assiduously at it and doing lots of great work, maybe you don't want, the more you speak, the less they're thinking. You might want to come over and privately guide the student. You might want to wait till you see most of the class came up with an answer. Whatever system you have, I would tell my students, when you're done work, put your pen down. That's my symbol that I know you're done. When you're done, look at me. If I see you looking at me, I know you're done. When you're done, show me your answer on your whiteboards. Sometimes I use little mini whiteboards, or if you have a better, more sophisticated, they might have their own little clickers. So I know you're done, I can see it. So at that point, I could go back to the student, because now I'm not taking away my other students' brain space, because they actually thought about it and said, you know what? I think you can come up with it just from the Dibur HaMaschil. Let's look at this Dibur HaMaschil and let's think what's perplexing about it. The student says nothing. It makes perfect sense. Say, how many words are there? Let's look at the meaning of those words. Do just, whatever it takes. Translate each word separately. Great. That's a good way of doing it. Guide. I know some people feel like, so what am I doing? I'm giving her the answer anyway. If a student is stuck and says, I can't do this, pick them up 90% of the way and let them do the last 10%, and then congratulate them as if they did 110%. It's worth it. It opens them up. Now again, I'm saying that here because this is fairly straightforward, and I know my student could get it. She's just not even thinking how to think about it because she's not used to wrapping her mind around just a Dibur HaMaschil. Now again, here I also gave the context of the pasuk, but here you don't really need it. So I don't even know if I would do that here. I think I would just focus on the Dibur HaMaschil, and I will push her until she came up with the answer, because I know she can. If you don't think she can, even with a lot of pushing, you might gloss over it and wait for an easier opportunity and then give her a success experience. But if you know they can get it, force them to get it, because now they look at themselves as, I thought of it on my own. I'm the Ben Chamish Lamikra, and that's worth it. I know we're a little bit over time, like 9 minutes. I'm going to give you one more. If you have to go, I understand. I just feel like we're not finished the step. But at least this first part of the step, I want you to feel you have some mastery of, because I want you to do it for the next week. Okay? There's a different Rashi. Here's my Dibur HaMaschil. Here's my pasuk, highlighted in red. What's bothering you about Bamud Anan? What's your question? Here, you probably would need to read the pasuk just because you don't, again, my students already read the pasuk. You, my students, never saw the pasuk before. So read the pasuk to know what we're talking about here, and then focus on the Dibur HaMaschil, Amud Anan, and what's bothering you about those words? Okay, I was waiting to at least get 5 answers. I loved it. Great work. So let's look. Sorry, my phone's the level arms on it. Let's look at my great questions here for my smart class. Now I had 5 questions, which I'm going to group into 2 going along a certain train, 2 going along a different train, and a separate one on her own train. So my first 2 questions are on the same train. Why does it that Hashem came in a cloud? What is it adding? And why is that important? Perfect, beautiful, great question. You phrase it differently, you're saying the exact same thing. What is the function of these words? Hashem, I can delete the words and the pasuk works perfectly. What am I gaining by these words? Then I have my next 2 questions, which went on a slightly different, more focused train, but also great work. Why is the cloud shaped like a pillar? And why does it add ba'amud and not just ba'anan? In other words, what these students want the pasuk to say, if they were question free, Vayired Hashem ba'anan, vayimel Pesach ha'ohel. Great work. I love it. You're both, I've grouped into 2 and 2. Perfectly correct. What am I showing here? First, I'm showing my students something very important. I don't know if boys have this issue, but girls definitely do. They think there's like a precise way of saying it. And if you don't get it exactly that way, like it's wrong. I'm sure as teachers, you see this. Your students say, wait, what was the word after she? I'm like, how do I know? You know, don't do that to me. I want them to know that a student saying, why was a cloud shaped like a pillar? And someone saying, why is it ab ba'amud and not just ba'anan, is saying the exact same thing, and it's both good thinking, and either way of saying it is great. But there are 2 different questions we got here. Which is the real question? Honestly, they're both authentic. Truly, as a ben chamish lemikra, it should bother you the functionality of this whole phrase. What's it doing here? And truly, as a ben chamish lemikra, it should bother you the ba'amud. What's it doing here? So how could I say one's right and the other's wrong? After we learn the Rashi, we might look back and ascertain which one more was Rashi's train. But at this moment, we haven't seen the Rashi. Our only gauge is this an authentic question on the pasuk that fits in Rashi's paradigm as a pashtan? Both questions work. They're brilliant. I love them. After we do the Rashi, we can come back and decide in the class which one we like better. For now, great work. I'm really proud of you guys. Okay. Then we had a little conversation going on between some people, and then I got another question. Isn't Hashem everywhere? Now that type of question, honey, I don't know. And I could open this up to the class. Class, Vayired Hashem b'amud anan. So Hani thinks the question, what's bothering her about the word b'amud anan is, isn't Hashem everywhere? I have 2 problems with that question. Class, can you tell me, what are my 2 problems with that question? Please unmute yourselves to tell me my problems with those questions. With that question.
Well, it has nothing to do with the Dibra HaMaskal, but I wasn't thinking of the Dibra HaMaskal when I wrote it.
Right. So if Hani's question was truly the problem on the pasuk, tell me what should have been the Dibra HaMaskal here? Let's
Vayired Hashem.
Exactly. On the words Vayired Hashem, I could say, what do you mean Vayired Hashem? He's everywhere. So that would be what I would want my class to respond to very strongly. It's a great question. How you train your class, they might come up with what else might be a problem here in our accepting Hani's question? Like, let's go back to Vayired Hashem. Let's pretend that was a Dibra HaMaskal. What else bothers us here about Hani's question within our job assignment of being Rashi's ben Chamish Lemikra? This is a little bit debatable, but I would like to bring this out to my class because it's something I want them to know and to think of very strongly. I'm studying Pshat. Vayired Hashem, isn't Hashem everywhere? Why am I not sure if I would accept that as a ben Chamish Lemikra's question?
Because somebody who's 5 is incapable of thinking in abstract terms.
Rashi's 5-year-old, halavai, I should be that brilliant after my next 100 or 200 years of my life. So I would never accept that he's not able to think in abstract terms, but you're going along the right lines. I don't want the word abstract. Though
No, I'm not talking about Rashi. Rashi obviously can, but for a ben Chamish Lemikra, thinking on a 5-year-old's term to know those type of things is a little bit hard for me to believe that a 5-year-old can grasp that.
Okay, and I knew that's what you meant, and I'm responding. So I'm responding on 2 levels.
I've actually heard 5-year-olds say questions like that.
First of all, Rabbi, you would be amazed what comes out of the mouth of my children. But I'm responding something else. I don't see your pictures when you talk. At least show me your face, so then I know who is talking. Rashi's ben Chamish Lemikra is brilliant. learn like 5 Rebbe sichos, and then your mind will be blown. Why is he so brilliant? Because he understands everything Rashi is saying. We need the Rebbe to decode it for us, or we need to break our heads, having been Chumash teachers for 30 years, to figure out what the Ben Chumash Mikra looked at and thought. So never, ever, ever, and I would say this very strongly if Mr. said this, I could spend 5 minutes complaining on this idea. Rashi's Ben Chumash Mikra is brilliant. That's not the issue. It's another issue. Aviva's class is not the type of question Rashi would ask. Thank you, Aviva. Why not? Whoever was speaking before used the word abstract. It's a different word than abstract, but I think she sort of meant it. She just didn't use the right word. Aviva said it's too general. No, it's not a general question. It's a different issue that takes it out of Rashi's paradigm. It's not pshat. Thank you, Hani. It's a very good theological question. And you can have many mefarshim that deal with theological questions. Does Rashi only buried and embedded in his perush what we term Yena Shel Torah? Of course, Yena Shel Torah usually means the Hasidic dimension, but you can also pull out of there the theological dimension. But it's only embedded. Rashi sticks officially to his box. His box is, I am a Pashtan. Sometimes you see this sometimes. There's a brilliant shot question, and Rashi knows the answer. But the problem is, the answer is a drash. And since the answer is a drash, he can't tell it to you. He's stuck. So what does he do then? He writes, look in Yesh Kama Midrashei Agada. What do you mean? Why don't you write it for me? I can't. I'm not allowed to. I'm a Pashtan. Great answer. I know your question. I can't tell it to you.
Huh?
Someone's unmuted if they can mute themselves. So we hear what, and I would take the time. By the way, I just took.
I pick up a prescription for this person.
Okay. I would take the time I just took in my class, going back to Chaya's question about time frame. This is valuable learning. It's not just valuable for Hani. It's valuable for every student in my class because we just focus on many very important principles. One, if the question is not authentic to the Dibur HaMaschal, out. And there's how I like it. Find me the Dibur HaMaschal that would work for. Two, it has to be a question within the paradigm of Pshat. If it's not within the paradigm of Pshat, it's a question. Rashi can't ask it. So it's worth it every time a student says something, explain it to have the learning experience you want to have. Someone's not needed to take a picture of themselves. All right. So at this point, did we finish this step? No, we didn't. But we are about 23 minutes over time, so we're going to stop. But we got to a breaking point, meaning next class, next week, we're going to go to another stage in developing Rashi's question. What's your homework? Do you have homework? Of course. We're teachers. We have to have homework. Your homework is you have now a week to apply these ideas. If you, Vashgacha Pratis, are beginning a new parak, use step 1, scoping it out and dividing it. If you are beginning a new section, use for sure step 2. Have them come up with questions out of that. And if you're teaching a Rashi, which I definitely assume you're going to be doing over the week, use this approach. Just show the Dibur HaMaschal or the Dibur HaMaschal in conjunction with the Pasuk and have them create questions. You will be amazed at how smart your students are. They will do it, and it will tremendously raise their highest in the world. So if any of any questions, I will take them, and otherwise we'll stop at this point. Any questions? No. Okay, great. Have a good Shabbos, and please use what we learned. It's amazing, and come back next week and tell me how well it worked or any questions you have on it. In the course of the week, if you're using these techniques and you have a question, put it on our WhatsApp group so then I can respond right away. You don't have to wait a week to wonder about something that you didn't understand on Monday. All right. Have a good Shabbos. Thank you for joining. And I hope even today you saw that you have new ideas, new methods in teaching Chumash.